Welcome in to the Week 2 Waiver Wire show for the Fantasy 4-pack. We're going to bring you guys some good content today. We're going to be going over some of our biggest takeaways from the Week 1 matchups, our top waiver wire targets to grab it heading on into Week 2. And then we're all going to, at the end of the episode, we're going to be giving you guys a trade for and trade away each. So, stay tuned. A lot of good stuff coming your way this episode. Before we get into it all, though, as always, make sure to follow us on socials. Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, share with your league mates. The more subscribers, more view time, more people, more eyeballs on our videos we get, the more consistent fantasy news we can bring you guys. And as always, also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That way you can stay up to date with any 4-pack news going on.
And if you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Yes, always talk to us. We're always happy to answer questions from the viewers. A little bit of fantasy news before we launch into things. Probably the biggest news. Sadly, a lot of high-profile injuries Week 1. Something you never like to see, and some injuries that happened before Week 1, like Kenny Golladay not playing. Mike Evans was banged up, but he was at least able to give it a go. Cortland Sutton, actually, I haven't checked his injury designation for today, but Cortland Sutton is still listed as questionable. So
yeah, he seemed like a long shot to be rolled out there. Miles Sanders, not even going with the team.
Yeah, it turns out that was as a COVID precaution, but Miles Sanders didn't play. Devontae Parker, left Week 1 with a hammy. Kittle had that knee sprain, but the biggest news: Marlon Mack goes down grabbing his calf. Speculated that it was an Achilles. We do have confirmation now that it was an Achilles tear. He's done for the season, and Frank Reich has come out and said that Jonathan Taylor is going to be leading that backfield for the rest of the year. So, not the way you want it to happen. You don't want to see a transition like this, but for Jonathan Taylor truthers to Jonathan Taylor owners, it's definitely good news. Good news in a bad way, but I know where I have Jonathan Taylor rest of season. I have him as the running back 12. Where do you guys have him from this point on? What are your expectations for him?
I honestly have him in that blurry mix of second round guys now, where it's kind of like the who do you like crowd. I like to call it with the Chubbs, Jacobs would be there if he didn't just have that explosive performance. Eckler, Miles Sanders, I still have him in there. He's in there, and I think it's basically who do you like and what price if you get a trade for him, what price you got to pay. But yeah,
I'm kind of in that same boat. Probably a little bit lesser on him because, the Colts have a pretty balanced offense. I would say I would put him below like the Chris Carsons because we know the Seahawks like to run the ball. Probably a little bit above James Conner as far as like my personal like for him because for whatever reason, I'm not big on Conner. It's just my gut feeling, especially this season. But I think I would put him pretty much in that middle pack, just outside of that top 12 spot.
Okay, so I'm probably I'm the highest on him then, but I do like if he's gonna be the guy. I like the talent. I like the landing spot for him. Obviously in the draft, Colts have a great O-line. I don't think we're gonna see what we saw Week 1 much the rest of the year. So
yeah,
personally, I'm all in on Jonathan Taylor. I think that he should be conservatively be a low end running back 1 with the upside to really move up that board from this point on. Other big news: Michael Thomas high ankle sprain. They're saying it's very similar to the high ankle sprain that Barkley had last year. So you really hate to see that for a first round pick for a lot of people and one of the most talented receivers in the game. I'm not if he plays. He says he's going to try and play through it. If he plays, do you guys start knowing that it's similar to what Barkley had last year? And we saw Barkley be either unable to go or very ineffective. Do you guys start Michael Thomas with this high ankle sprain from here on out?
I think no. I think him playing with the high ankle sprain is a mistake. I think that he's going to further injure himself.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of people he's going to be a must start unless you're in like a 10-team 2 receiver league. For most standard 12-team 3 receiver leagues, he's still at least a wide receiver 3 for me, just because he might not have that explosion after the catch, but I think he'll still at least get enough targets to maintain a wide receiver 2 volume. I'm more in the camp that I just hope that he takes a week or 2 off and maybe rest it up enough that he can be back to like 80-90%. But I am out on him. I was already out on receivers in the first round, and this just I will just wash my hands and be glad that I didn't draft him.
Fair. Another high-profile injury that I already briefly touched on, but Kittle knee sprain, another one where they're saying that he might be able to play through it, but we saw how effective Kittle was after the knee sprain this game. I don't want to start, and tight end I think is a little more replaceable too. I don't want to start Kittle at least next week if he tries to play through this. If I have another option, if I've got a Gesicki or a Hawkinson or a Hurst or someone like that on my bench, or even like a Jonnu Smith, I'm definitely considering starting them over Kittle if he plays, just because knees are kind of important to running and cutting, and if Kittle goes out, I mean, New England fans, we saw it with Gronk for years, where there were a lot of games where they rolled Gronk out there, but he wasn't really there. He was more of just a screen to distract defenders. Are you guys starting Kittle if he plays next week?
No, I am just gonna bench him. I don't care what they say. I saw that hit. It was one of those like you just threw up in your mouth a little bit.
His knee was inside out.
Yeah, that was the Willis McGahee.
Yeah, full chicken leg with that one. I thought he was done for the game and probably for the season, but kudos to him, and good luck that he was able to make it back out of the locker room and make it back into the game. But I think what we saw for the rest of that game is basically what we're going to be seeing going forward. He's going to be highly limited in practice. You're going to be,
I mean, with his veteran status, I'd be surprised if he practices at all.
I mean, he is still a younger guy. So I think him at least doing some run-throughs with the team would be helpful. But, yeah, he's going to be a guy that every week you're going to be just, tossing and turning. Do I start him? Do I not? I would just try and grab a spicy tight end off the waiver wire, or make a trade maybe, and try and hope you can stash him on your bench. And that he, like Thomas, just rests this thing out until he can get back to at least solid form.
I was surprised he walked off the field.
Yeah.
So we don't have this tight end as a waiver ad, because obviously his value is dependent on Kittle not being there. But if Kittle doesn't play, are you guys interested in Jordan Reed at all?
Oh yeah. Like I said, Jordan Reed's always been that if he's healthy, he has the talent to do it. And now he's in a system that loves to use the tight end. So for me, if Kittle's out next week, Jordan Reed is nearly a must start, especially with all the injury at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another season ender to round out our injury news, but Blake Jarwin done for the year. Obviously, if you were drafting Jarwin, you probably have another tight end on your roster, but it's still sad to see. Promising young tight end. It was going to be exciting to see what he can do. So hopefully he heals up well over the. Luckily, at least it happened early in the year, so he should be ready to go for next year. But you hate to see it if you for some reason only drafted Jarwin. Pay attention later in the episode. We do have a couple tight end ads that can sort of help you smooth out that position, but he may be someone to look at, trading for someone else if you were only rostering him. All right, well, that's going to do it for all the injury news. So before we get into waivers, you guys want to do a little 3 and out? So for brand new segment for us, but to start off every waiver episode, we're going to do a segment we're calling 3 and out, where we each give 3 takes on the previous week's matchups. We are filming this before the Monday games. Actually, the Steelers game is going on as we're filming this, so we're not going to have any takes on those games. And if there's any waiver ads that come out of those games, like a James Washington or someone like that, obviously they will not be included in this episode because we don't know the results of the matchups yet. But we at least got most of them. So I think without further ado, Frankie, why don't you take us away with your 3 and out?
Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I was very happy with the Packers game. I was, more importantly, very happy with the guy that me specifically, I don't know how you guys feel about him. Aaron Rodgers looked terrific. Typical, fashion, 360 yards, 32 completions, 4 touchdowns. A very Rodgers stat line, or Rodgers of old, we'll say. He's got his favorite weapon back, Devontae Adams. 156 yards, 14 receptions, which that's, I think, top 3 receptions on the week.
Oh, for Devontae?
Yeah.
Oh, no, number 1.
Oh, is he?
No, he's leading receptions and targets right now.
Yeah, I mean, unless someone like Juju, overtakes him tonight, he's going to be the reception leader this week.
Regardless, 2 TDs, so another very Devontae stat line, especially with Rodgers back. And that's something you want to see with the guy that's going at the back of the first or top of the second. I think that it was great to see both of them together again, and I think it's going to be a big year for both of them. I think that was honestly probably the happiest I've been, other than the Falcons obviously being the offense I thought they would be. But Hayden Hurst, slow day. But I think that the Packers with these two, honestly, they might be a Super Bowl favorite for me right now.
Bold. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I loved seeing it too, just seeing some classic guys. As we go back to one of our first episodes ever, I had Rodgers as my number 2 quarterback overall, and I backed off it a little bit, but I still believe that Rodgers could push himself up into that easy top 5, maybe top 3 guy.
And for your other takes, Frankie?
Oh, well, we touched on the Falcons a little bit, but another, offense that I really liked, the Cardinals. I mean, we all have been pretty much talking them up all offseason. I mean, you're not as much on the hype train, but I mean, Kyler looked terrific out there. Didn't really have a lot of super big passing game, but torched him for almost 100 yards on the ground. That only 3 players did last year. Lamar Jackson being one of them. I mean, pretty comparable there as far as. He looked like he was really on balance too with those runs. So I think that's something that we're going to see a lot from that Cardinals offense. Drake had 60 yards, touchdown. I mean, it's not really the what you want to see, but again, they were going against the Niners. So
I mean, I'm fine with Drake's performance. I think that's exactly what you want to see. He was the primary running back featured. He didn't run a ton, but that's because Kyler was running. I mean,
what
fantasy managers aren't mad that they started Drake or drafted.
Well, it's
Drake.
I was obviously you want to see those bigger numbers, but he is going against a really tough defense. Hop, similar to Devontae, really good day, 151 through the air. No TDs, but I mean, he definitely came out there to play. Almost 80 plays, I think it was about 76 runs, so that's definitely what we wanted to see with that up-tempo offense. The Niners will probably bounce back, but I mean, maybe that Super Bowl hangover will linger. And then something I didn't like as much, Mark Ingram. Only 10 rushing attempts. I didn't think the split for him and Dobbins and Lamar was going to be that drastic. No TDs. Dobbins managed to be the guy who was getting all those vultured TDs. But, I mean, we'll see if that carries over to the next game or if that was just TD luck. I mean, TDs are the hardest part of fantasy to predict. But, I mean, continue to take a look at that backfield, see how that develops. Hopefully, I mean, Ingram wasn't super high of a draft pick, so, I mean, hopefully he returns a little bit more value, but otherwise...
He's a 4th or 5th rounder for most people, so that could be, if that's the way that backfield's going to go, that could be pretty damaging. I need to see more before, because, it was a fluky game script. The Ravens were just kicking the Browns all over the field, so that could have just been, sort of save your starters. But,
yeah.
I need to see more person before I rule Mark Ingram dead, but yeah, not what I was expecting against that team.
Yeah, I was very surprised, especially with the game script of, I mean, it had to have been the sit your starters at that point because, I mean, only 10 rushing attempts too. That's not what you want to see.
I don't know. I'm not ready to call him dead yet, but I am very close to sealing the coffin on him just because of, this was the game for a running back to score their points, to just run out the clock and just pummel him down. They have 2 guys. It's not like and it's the first game, so it's not like they have to spell him to save him for the playoffs. This is week 1 when you should be trying to show out and really make sure everything's working. So I think Dobbins is more of a threat than we thought of. So I'm once again kind of glad that he ended up not falling to me. But for fantasy owners, you're gonna have to hold him for this week and hope that the game script does bounce back in his favor, and maybe you deal him then, or I'm wrong and Ingram takes the reins back.
All right, I'll go next here. I got 3 quick ones for me. My first one that I just wanted to, a little bit as a fan pick, but also just it looked great for fantasy. Welcome back, Cam Newton. 15 for 19, 78% completion for 155 yards. He would have had one through the air also, and like 15 more yards on that one if N'Keal Harry didn't decide to play volleyball and throw it out the back of the end zone. Tacked on 15 for 75 and 2 TDs on the ground. I mean, it looked like vintage Cam Newton. Obviously, it was against the putrid Miami Dolphins, so it might not look like that every week, but I think that if that's what Cam Newton's going to give you, I'd be happy rolling him out there most weeks, definitely in good matchups. I mean, he elevates himself to high-end streamer with that performance for me.
I'm very excited for the hats.
Yes, I mean, his fashion sense is interesting. Second take, as far as we talked about Thomas and his high ankle sprain, how that could, if not sideline him, at least limit him for the next couple weeks. I think if you're a Jared Cook owner, that's big news for you, because Cook already was second on the team in targets this week. 5 for 7, 80 yards. He was only behind Kamara. If Thomas, and the Saints barely threw this week. He also led the team in receptions, or in receiving yards. If Thomas can be unable to go, Breeze is likely going to have to lean on Cook and Kamara more to make that passing offense work. We've seen Cook be a high-end tight end before. We saw him make fantasy magic last year with the Saints. I think that this could be a continuation of that, partially due to injury, but if you drafted Cook, you may have yourself, at least for the foreseeable future, a top 5 tight end in him while he, garners the lion's share of those targets. And then my final one, and I want to just shameless self-promotion here. I don't want to say I called it, but if you didn't take my advice and add Joshua Kelly before this week, it is probably too late. You are going to have to pay for him now, because Anthony Lynn did a solid by us. He gave us some clarity on that running back situation, and I'll give you a hint. It's not Justin Jackson. Austin Eckler went out there, got 19 carries for 84 yards, 1 target, 1 catch, 3 yards, just like we drew it up. And Kelly got 12 carries to go with the 19 for Eckler, so that makes 31 carries between those 2 running backs, and he did 60 yards and a touchdown there. So obviously if they're going to use him like that, plenty of volume to go between them. I wouldn't be shocked if Kelly, given what he did in this game, gets an uptick in volume, because I don't think anyone expects Austin Eckler to get 19 carries a week. So I wouldn't be shocked if Kelly gets an uptick in volume and Eckler goes to be used more in the passing game like we saw last year. He's someone who I loved him before. I loved him all offseason. I tried to draft him where I could. I told people to stash him before this week. And I think that if you're in need of a running back, he should be someone that you are targeting heavily this week. And we'll touch on that more with the waiver claims, but targeting heavily this week, because he looked like the real deal out there.
All right, I guess I can round this one out, and what they say, always end on a negative note. So, because there was so much positive, but I think the negative notes just kind of outshone those for me. And usually you'll see a theme as I go through these. Starting with Adam Gase. My word, does he deserve a nickname like Bellatrix and the other coaches like Shanahanigans? Like, we need one. We need a solid nickname for this coach now. For all season, everyone's looking.
I think we can just call him the Reaper, because he just is the death of fantasy running backs.
Yeah, you go into the season, everyone was like, it's still Le'Veon Bell, though. He's still one of the best backs. So you drafted him in the 5th round. Like, he was a guy I was begrudgingly feeling I was going to have to take if I didn't go super heavy running backs. And then they take Frank Gore, and they're like, oh, we're using Frank Gore more. And, like, there's no way Frank Gore is going to be better than Le'Veon Bell. Here we are, week 1 in the books. They got the same amount of carries, and Frank Gore outrushed Le'Veon Bell, and I hate.
Well, to be fair, Le'Veon Bell did get hurt.
He did get hurt, but like I said, it wasn't like Le'Veon Bell was out there running and then got hurt and then Gore came out.
Yeah.
They were splitting. And they were. He was actively trying to find ways to not use Le'Veon Bell. It's like this guy picked up a manual of how to not win games, and he was like, sit your starters and not use them, and just like cross that one off. He's like, I've perfected this one. Like, all the shade you hear coming out of Seattle's like camp, like, and how much Jamal Adams is loving being on a team that wins and produces, and he gets to play. Like, this guy sounds like he's a kid again.
I mean, is he your early season favorite for first coach to get fired?
I mean, I saw the tweet on Sunday that they need to let him go, and I agree. I think, like I said, when he got picked up, I thought it was a bad idea, and I don't understand why he deserves a head coaching job at all. But moving on to another running back situation that I cannot wrap my head around, and he's getting close to the point where he also deserves his nickname. That's Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia has now spent 2 second-round picks on running backs. Kerryon Johnson, who at least I'll give him the credit, he has been a little injury-prone. So they said, let's go and fill that backfield with a dynamic pass-catching running back in DeAndre Swift. Great. Grand. We're on board. But then they go sign Adrian Peterson. You're like, okay, maybe this is just injury or, want some veteran talent back there. But then you give 14 carries to Adrian Peterson and only 3 to Swift. It's like, what are you doing? Like, is this another Packers where they're just, let's just spend draft picks on guys we're not going to use? At least when the Patriots did it last year, it was the 3rd-round pick. And, the writing was on the wall. They just didn't care last year with phoning it in. Like, this is a team that's trying to rebuild. Patricia's fighting for his job. Like, if this flops this year again, he's gonna be with Gase in the looking for a new job bin. Like, it frustrates me to no end to see these guys who we loved, like Gore, Peterson, like the league winners of yesteryear, now just destroying fantasy value for owners. Like, Peterson was a meme pick. We saw someone get auto drafted him, and he was like moaning about it all night. Now he's a 93 yards running for 6.6 a carry. Like, that might just kill all the value in that backfield.
Wait, did you say the Patriots phoned it in last year?
Oh yeah, I will full on admit that.
I love how the Patriots phoning in is them making the playoffs and losing to the Titans.
I mean, that's a down year for us.
It's a down year. Like,
That's a down year for the Patriots.
I mean, like I said, we can get into that in another episode. But Brady not wanting to use his new tools and all that, and just playing with what he had before. But and then I think rounding out the weekend, the one that hurt the most was I just felt like that meme, the just scene from Anchorman, Champ Kind just yelling Ron, and he's getting dragged away and crying. Riverboat Ron, you hurt me real good. Peyton Barber, like he's not even a guy we used to love. Frank Gore, Adrian Peterson, these are legends that we all have fond memories of. Peyton Barber, the guy who just comes onto a fantasy roster to steal fantasy value from good, hyped-up running backs. Like, you Ronald Jones owners out there, everyone who was like, oh, yeah, it's just Peyton Barber. Maybe he'll get a couple carries and then just go away, but he never wants to leave. Antonio Gibson, the hype player, he's finally let loose. Adrian Peterson saying they want the guy in the system, and it's all because he got cut because Antonio Gibson was taking the job. And then Riverboat Ron hands 17 carries to Peyton Barber in that win. All the goal line work. And it's not like he was doing Adrian Peterson things and averaging 6.6 on the ground. He averaged 1.7. 1.7. And for just to let you know, with 17 carries, almost double Antonio Gibson's work, Antonio Gibson still out-carried him with 36 yards and averaging 4 on the ground. Like, it feels like there was a light flashing in his eyes all game. Like, hey, maybe you have a better running back out there. But nope, he knew how much we loved him. I guarantee you, he's in a fantasy league with another coach that he does not like, who started Gibson, and he's like, yeah, here's a big middle finger for you.
I feel like that is very on brand for Peyton Barber, though. come into a game, steal touchdowns, and vanish into the mist.
That's what he's for. It's why people should have been more bearish on drafting Antonio Gibson, because the writing was on the wall and we ignored it. You don't add people like Adrian Peterson and Peyton Barber and J.D. McKissick to your team if you're not going to use them. Like, they're there for a reason. Fantasy owners that drafted Antonio Gibson in the middle rounds brought this upon themselves. He's never been a high volume guy. He's never had the lion's share of carries, and the only person saying that Washington wanted to give him that was Adrian Peterson on the way out. That's it.
I'm still gonna hold him. Not starting him until I see better production, but
I'm not saying cut him, but the 6th, 7th round where he was going was too early, and people who started him this week, sorry, like, that's what you get for starting a running back on a bad football team with Peyton Barber on it.
To be fair, I mean, I wouldn't start Miles Sanders, but he decided to not go and play football.
All right, let's get to the waiver claims. For QB, there's really only one that I think is worth mentioning, and that's Teal Steele at 27.9% ownership. He went out there and had himself a game against the Indianapolis Colts, just like we all expected. He's definitely a matchup play. I'm not shoving him into the top 12 of quarterbacks, but Gardner Minshew is definitely a good feel-good story, and he's someone who I think down the road could provide some good fantasy value for people. You guys got any opinions on Teal Steele one way or the other?
Yeah, I like him as a pickup, especially because he finished as the QB 11 in half-point PPR. So he was only 20% owned. So he's a guy you should be able to easily pick up, and you probably shouldn't be fighting anyone for him.
Yeah.
Because other people will be going to get, if Cam Newton somehow available in your league, or if Mitch Trubisky with his performance, like, Teal Steele's going to get overlooked, and I think he's a great guy to stash on your bench if you're the streaming quarterback guy.
I mean,
he's going to be throwing so much.
You don't want him next week. Next week he has Tennessee, but then after that, Miami, Cincinnati, Houston, Detroit. Like, that's a good stretch right there where you can start him 4 weeks in a row. So I agree. He's if you're someone in the streaming quarterback game this year, if you didn't get Dak or Kyler or Lamar or Mahomes, go out and grab him, because he's got a juicy 4-game stretch coming up. Jumping to running backs from there, our top running back ad for the week at roughly 28% ownership, James Robinson. He got 100% of the running back touches in his backfield. I think that he is a surprise, to be sure, for how much I guess the bigger surprise is how little Chris Thompson did, but he's someone who, if he's available, he's my top waiver ad. I'm looking to throw in 25, maybe 30 fab bucks at him if I don't need a running back. I'm just looking at him as a bench stash, and if I need a running back, I'd probably go as high as 25% of my waiver budget.
Yeah, if you're one of those guys who does have that, draft capital in Mark Ingram, where you drafted him as your second running back, you definitely want to invest a lot of your fab budget. I wouldn't go higher than 25.
I'd say like 25, 30% is probably the ceiling for what I would invest, but just keep in mind that schedule we just said for Gardner Minshew, he gets also. I mean, those are 4 pretty easy defenses to run against.
Yeah,
we just saw CEH. I mean, this guy obviously isn't CEH. We just saw CEH tear up Houston. Cincinnati got lit up by the combination of Eckler and Kelly. Miami couldn't stop anyone from running. Didn't matter who it was. Detroit just got fairly torched by Chicago too. I mean, they limited Montgomery. Montgomery was injured.
Yeah, unless you have one of those like top guys too, it's very rare that you see a running back maintain 100% of their backfield.
Yeah. And there's no competition. I mean, it's just Chris Thompson.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, he's a guy that even if you miss out on the James Robinson sweepstakes this week, if he has a bad matchup against Tennessee, you could see that guy, the person who picked him up, might waffle and drop him.
Oh yeah, so shunted right back to the wire.
Right. So you could see someone who, if your league kind of goes a little sheepish on him and doesn't spend too much, and you try and get him for a bargain. Because I know if somebody drops 25% of their waiver, they're going to hold on to him just to try and justify that fab. But yeah, you could see him back on waiver wires next week.
Second guy, and honestly, he was in contention for top waiver ad for me. I think the big thing that knocked him out of that spot for me at least was the fact that James Robinson is the only one in that backfield really. But Malcolm Brown is another one who, if you're hurting for a running back after week one, it looks like he's pretty cemented as the starter, at least for now in that offense. Obviously, Cam Akers could take it over at some point, but Brown rushed 18 times for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was a factor in the passing game. You kind of gotta respect what the Rams are showing you, and I think go out and add Malcolm Brown as currently the starting running back on that team.
He looked really good last night too.
Oh, and more importantly than that too, the blocking looked good.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that's what I was gonna get to is the Rams are actually moving like forward down the field with their line. They're actually getting some push. They're not moving horizontally, as I said last night. I forget who was commentating, but
Last time it was Collinsworth.
yeah, I think he looked really comfortable, and I mean obviously he was there last year, so he knows the offense.
Yeah,
it might have been Cam Akers getting more acclimated, being the rookie, but
I don't think Malcolm Brown's going to be the guy all season long, but I think you could at least get, maybe the first half the season worth of games out of Malcolm Brown. And who knows, maybe if he keeps rushing this well, maybe they do just give him the job this year and they just, let him keep that seat warm for Cam Akers next year.
Yeah, honestly, he gets the nod a little bit. Like, if I could only get one of these guys, I'll take Malcolm Brown just because he has that much better of an offense and has more scoring opportunity. And their offense is built around disguising the run with play actions and whatnot. So I just think he's got, even if his carries and attempts come down, I think he still has a more efficient offense that can still produce for him. Whereas I think with Jacksonville, you're looking at a situation where even if he maintains 100%, that's 100% of very bad carries that we could see a week where he carries it 20 times for 52 yards. Like,
third on our list, Joshua Kelly, 1.2% owned, so he's almost definitely out there. Apparently, no one listened to me. And he got 12 touches for 60 yards and a touchdown in Sunday's game against the Bengals. He's another person who, if you're hurting for a running back, I would go out there and target him heavily with your fab budget because he's going to be able to provide you value down the season. We saw how Anthony Lynn wants to use his running backs, and it's him and Eckler, and Justin Jackson doesn't exist. So go out and grab him because, the next week and Tampa, he has 2 bad-ish matchups, I'll say, in the next 3 weeks in Kansas City and Tampa Bay, but he's got Carolina in between. Carolina just got eviscerated by Las Vegas. And then after Carolina, he's got New Orleans, the New York Jets, Miami, Jacksonville, and Las Vegas. So, he's going to be someone who I think fantasy owners can rely on, honestly, going down the meat of the season this year. Tyrod Taylor's not good. They're going to have to run, and he looks like he could honestly be their new Melvin Gordon. So I encourage fantasy owners that if you don't get James Robinson or Malcolm Brown, make sure you get Joshua Kelly because he could at least bail you out a little bit if you got an underperforming early round running back pick.
Or if someone takes all 3, you're very unlucky.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, I like all these guys, especially because we know how valuable these early waiver wires are. This is where you get the Terry McLaurins and the other guys who just pop out of nowhere. There's always going to be the smoke screen plays who just happen to get themselves into a lot of carries or some touchdowns, Peyton Barber. So that's why we want to try and look through these guys and see, who actually has it. That's why, we talked about Russell Gage is a guy we're kind of off on just because we think it was game script and Hayden Hurst being locked up all game, just because of how good Jamal Adams is.
Yeah.
So, like I said, don't be bearish. Go in on these guys because week 8, week 9, you're gonna just be picking up streamers.
You don't want to be the guy left holding your full fab budget in like week 10, just hoping that someone gets hurt and their handcuff is out there. The fab is there for a reason, and the free agent market dries up quick. And the last guy for running backs this week, Nyheim Hines. Obviously, Marlon Mack done for the year. Nyheim Hines was getting some work before he went down. Nyheim Hines also did some pretty good things in the passing game. So he's someone who I'm less excited for just because we know he's going to be taking the backup role to Jonathan Taylor, and Jonathan Taylor also, was very successful in the passing game this week, but Hines got the touchdowns and that's kind of fluky, but he still had 28 on the ground and 45 through the air and a touchdown apiece in both categories. So I don't want to rely on him if I don't have to, but if you're someone who, maybe Miles Sanders is going to be missing more time, or maybe Mark Ingram actually is just washed, and you're just kind of like sitting there like, crap, what do I do with my running back 2 slot? He could at least steal you a week or two, maybe get you some flex value.
Yeah.
So he's a bit of a deeper dive. Grab him if you miss the first 3 guys, but he's someone who should be able to provide fantasy owners at least limited value.
Yeah, or you have, hypothetically 3 receivers that are starting that are all injured, and you need somebody to put in your flex slot.
Yes, you could actually just use him in your flex spot as well. You don't have to start him in the running back spot. But for wide receivers, a couple interesting options here. Paris Campbell looked real good for the Colts under Phillip Rivers. Finally he's getting his chance to shine. Only 1.4% ownership too. So he's someone who I'm very interested in at wide receiver this week, especially if you need to go pick up a wide receiver. Say if Michael Thomas is on your team and you need to get some depth at the position, because we know Phillip Rivers is a competent quarterback capable of supporting at least one, sometimes 2 fantasy wide receivers. So he's someone who I'm perfectly fine with going out and targeting as the top wide receiver this week. Skill-wise, I like him just about as much as the next couple guys, but we at least know that he's not really fighting for anything in that system. He should be cemented as at no worse the 2.
Yeah.
You can take this one.
I would say, I was already in on Campbell pretty hard. I picked him up in a couple leagues. Dynasty, I think. I would say I'd put him pretty much in the same talk as Zach Pascal. They're probably about the same talent-wise. I mean, I think it honestly depends how well Rivers plays in Indy.
You think that he's the same as Zach Pascal with talent? That's a damning take.
Yeah, I feel like Zach had his chance to shine, but I am super in on Paris Campbell. He's a guy I have had no worry about where he was going. His ADP stayed pretty consistent into a late round great grab. I love seeing 9 targets, 6 receptions. I mean, this kid should be able to just be a great number. I think he has low end wide receiver 2 written all over him, and I think most leagues you want him on your bench at least.
Yeah, I mean, T.Y. Hilton is getting older. We could legitimately see him just end up being the number 1 for the Colts, or at the very worst, he's the number 2 behind T.Y. And we've seen Rivers support Keenan Allen and Mike Williams before, so I think he's a very interesting option. The next 2 are also very interesting, but you're kind of gambling. And those next 2 are MVS and Alan Lazard. And I say you're kind of gambling because they both had great performances, and they both play for the same team. So one of them is likely going to end up winning the secondary role in that Packers offense behind Devontae Adams. The other one's not going to be quite as valuable. So it's just kind of who do you feel is going to get the nod? Personally, I'm on the Alan Lazard side. I've been a outspoken supporter of him during the offseason. I currently have him rostered in a lot of leagues that I could get him in because I took him as a late round target. I like the chemistry that he has with Rodgers. Obviously, he got less targets than MVS and less yards, but they both got 4 catches, and they both ended up in the end zone. I would personally grab him over MVS. They're also about the same ownership currently. They're both at roughly 6% ownership. I'm sorry. Yeah. Alan Lazard is 6%. MVS is 0.6%. I couldn't read my own handwriting. So not roughly the same percent ownership, but they're both going basically unowned. Are you guys both on the Lazard train as well, or are either you guys MVS truthers?
I'm on Team Lazard. I have him rostered in a couple leagues. I think that he's, contrary to your opinion, I think he's the clear number 2. I mean, they ended up with the same volume and both got a touchdown, but I think that Lazard's just more talented.
Yeah. I want to be Lazard, but I think just because Lazard's going to be the popular ad this week, I'll throw the cheap ad at MVS, who and hope that the targets were the tell for who's the number two. Because like I said, they both basically did the same thing in the game. MVS just did it better and had more opportunities to do it. So, like I said, it could just been who was open on certain plays, why Lazard was out targeted by MVS. But I think for me, because I'm probably going to be going heavier into the running back market this week, I'll throw a cheap ad at MVS and just hope Lazard is, everyone else spends their money on Lazard.
Sure. And then the last guy, and it is just another attrition guy here, but Brandon Ayuk, only owned in 5% of leagues. He didn't play this week with a hammy, but hammies are generally short-term injuries, so he could easily play next week. Obviously, Kittle's going to be limited. Debo just got placed on IR, and there was no one that really emerged from the pack as the number one receiving option last week. They kind of just spread, the maximum targets on the team, I believe, were 5 targets. So Ayuk is someone who should be available in most of your leagues and could provide excellent, or maybe not excellent, but at least solid receiving volume for you, while most of the lead pass or receiving options on that team are down for the count. So go out and grab him as well if he's kicking around. For tight end, not a lot of sexy options out there, but a couple that I think could be a nice balm for fantasy owners if they are, feeling that sore knee with Kittle, or if they just lost Blake Jarwin for the season. O.J. Howard, 8.1% owned. He looked like the clear number one tight end in Tampa Bay, just like I said. Rob Gronkowski had like 11 yards. Predictably, he's either washed or going to take a little bit to get back into football after missing a year. I think we finally could be seeing the O.J. Howard we all drafted him as last year.
Yeah, I mean, as New England fans, we know that Brady loves a pass-catching tight end that he can rely on in the red zone. So, if Godwin's concussion ends up being something and he misses a week, I mean, we could see a big game out of OJ, and with the return of Mike Evans' dropsies and him only getting one catch at the
brutal.
Yeah, him only getting his first catch at the very end of the game. Granted, it was a touchdown to save fantasy owners some value, but O.J. Howard just feels like a nice, safe, streaming tight end to me.
Well, and just to talk about Mike Evans, that wasn't even for lack of trying. Brady was targeting him a fair amount during the game, and it was just bricking off of his hands and chest.
Yeah, that's that trap card coming to play.
But I like O.J. Howard, 4 for 6, 36 yards and a touchdown. Like you said, Brady likes his tight ends. We know O.J. Howard is very skilled. He's someone who you kind of can just plug and play. I think he might have some bad weeks, but that's just the tight end position for you. And then the other guy is Logan Thomas, who is 0.2% owned. He did get quite a bit of volume in that Washington football team's offense. He caught 4 passes, team high, 8 targets, 37 yards and a touchdown. I think the targets are going to come down, but he's someone who I'm not excited to play him. But if you need a tight end, he's not the worst guy to go and grab, because you'll find out pretty quickly if he's the real deal or if this is a 1-week show. And if it was a 1-week show, you can just cut him and move on.
I mean, especially if you're in that situation where you draft Kittle high and you either didn't draft the tight end or you just took one really late.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I said, he's just going to be a cheap ad for you, not going to have to spend too much fab. And like I said, we've seen Riverboat Ron produce a quality tight end. Granted, Greg Olsen, we don't know if Logan Thomas is anywhere near the Greg Olsen talent, but
something tells me it's a no, but
we'll leave it to be seen. And then on top of that, Washington themselves, Jordan Reed, they like both those two things put together. Those two things love tight ends. So we put them together. I'm not too surprised that they went to their tight ends much. So I'm in on him as if you're just whoever is out there and streaming tight end, get him. I don't see any reason why you should leave him on your waiver wire this week.
And then for streaming defenses this week, we are looking at the Rams and Titans. Rams get the Eagles, Titans get the Jaguars. Both are out there in under 50% of leagues, so there's a good chance they're there on your waiver wire. If you guys are streaming defenses, make sure to grab one of them because the Eagles looked bad and the Jaguars didn't, but the Titans are a much better defense than the Colts.
Yeah, and oh my God, did Aaron Donald look good against the Cowboys? He was making those grown men look like children as he threw them around.
Yes.
He was going up against a rookie in steel, though.
I mean, I don't really care who Aaron Donald goes up against.
I just thought at the end of the game, I mean,
I don't care.
I don't understand the play of putting a rookie against him, especially knowing that it's Aaron Donald.
I mean, they might not have had a choice. You can't just shuffle offensive line. Like, they're not all one position. He might have been the best option for the Cowboys.
And do remember the lack of depth that the Eagles have right now at O-line.
Oh, yeah.
And how much that O-line,
Yeah.
Washington's O-line was torching them. So I'll take the guy who's one of the few in the 99 club against a battered, full of holes Eagles line. So,
yeah, I mean, this could be a 4-sack week for Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
So definitely go out and try and get one of them if you're going to be in need of a streaming defense. Let's wrap this episode up with our trade targets. You always want to give me your trade for and trade away, Frankie.
I'm not a Will Fuller truther, so if I have Will Fuller after that week, I don't believe in his health. I don't think that he's going to maintain that ceiling. I ship him out for, honestly, not whatever I can get, but, maybe a sexy name, maybe another good receiver if you're in need of a running back. Sticking with the same trade for, I would trade for his colleague in Brandon Cooks. I think that he's going to...
He did have a very bad game.
He is down week. You're going to be able to get him probably not super cheap, but relatively cheap. And, I mean, he's going to be one of those guys who can potentially be a wide receiver too by the end of the season, especially with Deshaun Watson throwing the ball the way he is.
I'm complete opposite of you, Frankie. I am holding on to Fuller. Like I said, Fuller is a good name to trade just because, like I said, he does carry the injury risk. But I think we are seeing what they want to use Fuller as a, poor man's DeAndre Hopkins. So I'll take that all day with the quality of throws and targets that he's going to get from Deshaun Watson. So yeah, I mean, if I was you, I would hold him for a couple weeks. If you think he's going to get injured, hold him for 2 or 3 weeks. Let him give you some good performances, and then ship him. But I'm in on him this season. He was a cheap enough buy that he's probably your wide receiver 3 or a flex guy for you. So hold him and just prepare for it with some, Paris Campbell. Go get Paris Campbell, sit him on your bench, and then if Fuller goes down, you got him. But for me, I'm going a little bit more high price with my sell because I think you're still going to be able to get, 90 cents on the dollar for him, and that's Mr. Michael Thomas. This high ankle sprain, they said just go talk to the guy who had Saquon in your league last year. Let him tell you all about his woes of missing the playoffs and how bad a guy as good as Saquon was and how bad he performed. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to flip him for a running back because you're probably in need because you might have been a guy who went him into Miles Sanders or something like that, and you're hurting. So I'm going to take Michael Thomas. I'm going to take maybe a running back that I drafted in the 3rd or 4th. Your Melvin Gordon types, depending on what happens with him tonight. Package them together and try and get yourself a 1st-round guy that maybe a Joe Mixon or something like that, and a lesser wide receiver, maybe a Will Fuller if you got a non-truther here. But that's, like I said, Michael Thomas. If you have him, get him off your team now while he still has value, and it's just people are saying still have good news that he's going to play through this. For my trade for, it's Mr. DeAndre Swift. I'm all about targeting guys who had poor performances with lots of talent. I refuse to believe that Adrian Peterson is going to continue to hold that job. I think we saw what Carry-On's going to be. So, and with how poor he played, I think people are ready to sell already on him. Go in, send him a nice little offer. Maybe you send him a running back who had a little bit of hype. Maybe you win the waiver wire sweepstakes. you send him, a Jacksonville running back. You send him somebody else like that. Stash him on your bench. This guy, I think, by the end of the season, will know exactly what's up with him, and I think he's going to be a sneaky league winner.
See, I would rather have James Robinson than DeAndre Swift. I also don't think you're going to have to trade for DeAndre Swift, because I think if you own DeAndre Swift, you might be ready to drop him after that drop touchdown pass.
Butterfingers.
Yeah, that was ugly. I mean, in his defense, it was a tough pass. I mean, that defender was like 10 yards behind him. He could hear the footsteps coming.
I mean, that crowd noise, too.
Yeah, it was a rowdy stadium. I've got a trade for and a trade away. My trade away is kind of cheap, though, so I prepared a second trade away as well. My trade for is David Montgomery. I really liked what I saw from him. I went back and watched some of his highlights from the game. He looked good. He only got 13 carries, but he was averaging 4.9 a carry, 64 yards, and he was still, coming back from a groin in this game. If they're going to use him like that, where he, was the clear lion's share of the carries, and he's gonna run as successfully as he did, and hopefully, get healthier as the season goes along too. I'm very interested in getting him, and it's likely that Dave Montgomery in your league, if they just look at the stat line, they're gonna be like, yeah, it's not that impressive, and not a sexy name, not a sexy stat line. You might be able to get him for cheap. My trade away, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, Sammy Watkins. We've seen him do this before.
Fire sale.
This is not a new thing for fantasy owners. Take advantage of that performance. Package him with someone if you can. Let him be a landmine for something. Maybe this is finally Sammy Watkins' year. Maybe he's finally going to figure it out. But I don't want to be the one betting on that to happen. So if you can, package him with someone else, or maybe there's a Sammy Watkins lover in your league, but just get him off your team if you can. Obviously, don't give him away, but definitely shop him around, see if somebody wants to pay for that nice performance he had, and try and get yourself someone a little more stable. And then because I did think that one was a little cheap, he's a bit more of an obvious target. Someone else who I am also fire sailing if I can. All right, and this one should be actually pretty easy to do too, given how good he performed this week, or how good his stat line looks at least. Chris Carson. He had less carries than Carlos Hyde in a game where they didn't really need to use Hyde. I mean, that was a shootout of a game. The Falcons were down obviously, but they were still scoring back. They were a constant threat in that game. Chris Carson only got 6 carries, 21 yards. He looked pedestrian. He bailed his fantasy owners out with 6 catches for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, but we've never seen Chris Carson be this high-volume reception guy. And on top of that, they already have some really good receiving options on that team. We know the Seahawks don't like to throw. I mean, maybe this is the new look Seahawks. If they're really going to let Russ cook, then maybe this is how they're planning on using Carson, but I don't want to be the person betting on that, and I don't like the fact that Carlos Hyde had the better day on the ground. Don't like that at all. They literally had 13 carries between the two of them, and Carlos Hyde had 7. So I'm worried if I'm a Chris Carson owner. I try and play up this stat line that he had, sell him to someone who's hurting at running back. Maybe you try and flip him for a running back who had a more average looking day in the scoring department for maybe try and flip him for Austin Eckler or Joe Mixon or Nick Chubb. But I am trying to get off the Chris Carson train this week. Well, that'll do it for us. Join us on Wednesday when we bring you. I was doing math in my head. And I was like, well, no, we're filming on Wednesday, so that episode will be coming out Thursday for our Thursday night breakdown and the first half of Week 2's games. And I wish you all the best of luck with your waiver wires. Make sure you get your claims in before they process on Tuesday night. And if you have any questions, reach out to us on Twitter. Comment on this video. We're happy to answer any more specific waiver questions that you guys might have. See you guys on Thursday.